everyone. So David is currently on vacation with his family, so it's up to Lindsay and me to handle this webinar, and we are really, really excited to have everyone in here. Happy Friday. I'm recording this, and we will be editing it and then uploading it to YouTube and the membership site. So we're very happy to see familiar faces. If ever you have anything you want to ask, anything you want to share, please know that the comment section or the message section or the chat box is going to be monitored by me. I'm for those who doesn't know me, I'm Chrissy, the creative director of Cultivate Wins. We are very much open to conversation, and I've already asked David's permission. We can talk about him behind his back, so feel free to let us know what if you have any comments or questions about him. This is something that David has been telling everybody, like you talk to David, and this is something that he can't stop talking about. So everybody in here would most likely know the 5x5, the core principles of Cultivate Wins. And it has been it's like a ripple effect. Like personally, the 5x5 doesn't just have an impact on me, it has an impact on my husband and even my mom and my dad. And I know it's the same for everybody. And having David talk about the 5x5 multiple times, numerous times, and then hearing other people sharing how much it's changed not just their business but also their personal life. Everybody's been curious about how to apply this. So with I'm very much honored to introduce to you our master applicator. So it's David's term. He always calls this person the master applicator because that's what we see whenever she talks about the business, the family. It's like it's automatic that she also talks about the 5x5. So if I'm gonna be asked on who I want to be like or who I want to be compared to, this is a person, an amazing person that I want to be compared to. So I really look up to her. And when I was first introduced in the community, she was one of the friendly faces that I was looking for whenever we have webinars. So I always say to David that whenever we have Cultivate Wins events, it's not complete without Lindsey Bavaro. So she's the master applicator that will be leading this webinar. She's going to talk about how to apply the 5x5 in her business. And I like the bit that you added. In the core principles, you mentioned that there's two that you struggled with. So I'm very, very excited to hear about what that would be because I think that's going to be a very relatable story. So with I'm very much honored to introduce to you Lindsey. So
thank you. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us, and special shout out back to Chrissy. Thank you, who's helping me host this today. Chrissy is going to monitor the chat and any hand raises. I certainly appreciate that. Thank you. And I'll try to stop a couple of times so that we can address those. But Chrissy, if you see anything that's totally relevant to what we're doing, just stop me so that we can talk a little bit about it.
Definitely.
So like Chrissy said, today we're going to talk about the practical applications of Cultivate Wins concepts. We're going to focus on David's 5x5 specifically. And if you don't know what that is, somehow haven't seen that yet, we're going to talk about it. I'm going to give you a few examples of how I use those core concepts to transform my business. And if we have time, I'm going to hit on those two areas that really were a struggle for me, but eventually I was able to push and find my way through. So for anybody who doesn't know me, I see a lot of faces on here, but a bit about me. My name's Lindsay. I own a transaction coordination business in Washington State in the real estate industry. We currently have 8 team members. And why the heck am I qualified to talk about this topic? Why isn't David here? So a little bit kind of about my background. 1.5 years ago, our team was half the size it is today. It was me, my mom, my husband, my dad. So we have a very unique family makeup. And when I started the business in 2015, they slowly started joining me with kind of a grand vision of one day having the freedom to be our own bosses, to control how much income we could earn, to control how much we actually worked, our hours that we're putting into it, to have more time with our family, to have less time commuting. I'm sure a lot of you can kind of relate to those wants in your life, but in a year and a half ago, we kind of burst really bad. Business was going great, but we were completely burnt out. And an example, my poor parents were working from 6 a.m. in the morning until 10 or later at night. I have the ability to say no a little bit easier than some of my other team members. So they just couldn't put it down. If there was stuff coming into their inbox still, they were working themselves ragged. So with that, we were working weekends, all four of us. We didn't have any coverage in case somebody needed to take a day off because we were already overextended. We didn't have time to take vacations. And even worse than that, because I was uniquely working with family, we found out unexpectedly how hard it is to work with your family, especially under constant pressure and no time to actually rest and press that reset button. So September 2020, I was broken. Personally, I felt like I was failing my family because they certainly did not sign up to be a slave to the business. They signed up for more freedom, and that wasn't what it was doing for them. And we didn't have other jobs to turn to right away. Locally in my market, there was not anybody running anywhere similar of a business. So I didn't have anybody to mastermind with. I did not have anybody to vent to. I did not have a business model that I could try to emulate. I felt super, super alone. And then TC's Facebook groups started popping up. They were in existence long before I found them, but somehow I found one, and it kind of gave me an opportunity. Yes, yay. It gave me an opportunity to kind of say, my way's certainly not the only way, and there has to be a better way somewhere out there. Maybe not redoing my whole business, but there's got to be something, one concept out there that I can take and start to little by little pick away at my business and the model that I had. So I actually came across David on YouTube. He had one video up about his virtual whiteboard, and from there it was pretty much history. We are not perfect today. We certainly have a lot of room to grow, but we are not working anything like we were a year and a half ago. My mom has Fridays off now. My husband works about 5.5 hours a day. My dad and I are 40 hours a week or less in the business. When I talk about Airtable and some of the tech tools that I like, I will certainly play on those for more than 40 hours, but I consider that my personal hobby. But it wasn't magic. I put in the work, but the 5x5 really did help transform where we're at to where we are today. So let's dive into the 5x5 a little bit. And if you haven't seen it before or you don't know what it is, simply put, it's just company values. Okay, I'm going to keep it simple. It is company values. And if you Google company values, that's defined as a set of guiding principles and fundamental beliefs that help an organization function together and towards a common business goal. Now, you might be thinking, how are company values going to stop me from burning out or push me to the next level? And that's a great question, because that was one of my questions. That was one of my first. I'm always devil advocate and saying, well, I don't know if that's going to work quite for me, how it's worked for you. And there's a lot of companies out there that do have values, that do have a vision statement, a mission statement. And in fact, some of you here might actually already have some of those values in place for yourself. And that's awesome. Some of the values that I have commonly heard are loyalty, honesty, respect, going the extra mile, working with integrity. And those are all amazing values, and they're great traits for a company to have. But no, company values are not going to propel you forward in life or in business. And businesses can certainly run successfully without them. So the real game changer for me with David's 5x5 was applying all of those concepts, not just as values that I'm going to say that we should, when we're interacting with people, yeah, I should probably scale that or whatever. I'm not just going to be honorable to them or loyal, because I'm going to do that anyways. We should all have integrity in business. Okay. These are principles that I can apply as an actual roadmap to achieve my goals. So I use every single one of those as a stepping stone, as a clear direction of what I need to act on in order to get where I want to go. So let's open up the 5x5 so I can show you what it is. Okay, can you guys see that on your screen?
Yes.
Okay. So you've probably seen this before. David loves posting it, talks about it a lot, like Chrissy said. And I'm probably going to explain it just a little bit differently than he does, so bear with me. On the left side over here, we have 5 foundational principles. And I personally like to think of this as my operations roadmap. Okay, not just values I'm going to talk about with my team, but this is actually the roadmap that I need to follow in order to make sure that my company is operating in the way it needs to in order to reach my goals. So to summarize the operations side, every service we offer and every system, process, or tool we use must be scalable, duplicatable, freakishly predictable, efficient, and effective. And if we come over to the right side of the 5x5, I consider this to be my roadmap to people. Okay, this is the people side of things. What steps can I take to ensure that the people in my organization are happy and are going to stay with me, and that everybody I interact with is going to be happy with the services that we provide, want to give us referrals, want to keep continuing coming back to us for more services. So every action we take as an organization must fully be informed by peace, contentment, joy, gratitude, and compassion. So David doesn't typically split it up and say operations and people. That's just something that I needed to do in my brain to really resonate with how I'm going to apply this. So how can I use these words to make sense in my day-to-day life? But once you actually start applying these concepts, you quickly find that all 10 of these words are really intertwined. And in fact, you can't really work on the operations side without dealing with the people side, and vice versa. You cannot help the people side without also positively impacting the operations side. So let's dive in a little bit deeper into each of these items. And as we cover them, I'm also going to give you some questions or standards of how you can apply these to your business. What can you do to basically audit your business compared to each one of these principles? And I mentioned that I'm describing these a little bit differently than David. He has a really great talent for capturing what I consider kind of all the things and putting them into one simple word. And for me, I really needed to list out all the areas of my business that each one of these words impact, so that I can, on a daily basis, when I'm doing stuff, kind of know right away, have my reference of what does scalable mean to my business today? What areas of my business does that impact? Okay, so moving into the first item on the operations side, we have scalable. And for a quick reference on why being scalable is important to my business, I've written down that this is where we measure the limits on our personal capacities and also our business's growth potential. Okay. What are our personal capacity limits and what are our business's growth potential limits? And to find areas in your organization that might just not be up to par yet on being scalable, you can ask yourself, would you do it the same way if your company was to grow 3 times the size that it is today? So an example that David uses often, but that I'm going to hit again, has to do with real estate and with new contracts coming in as a transaction coordinator. And I'm going to use this example, even though David said it before, because this is one of the steps that did truly change how we operate as a business and give us time back. So we were working about 200 files simultaneously between 4 people. 4, not 3, sorry. And that meant that some days we could have up to 15 new contracts in one day. And it was taking us an hour and a half to process new contracts. So if we looked at, is that scalable, there simply wasn't enough time in the day for us to do the volume that we were taking with the systems that we had. So no, we could not grow at all. In fact, we were behind just in the fact that we were taking an hour and a half to open up new files. So my very first conversation with David after I saw him on YouTube was, how long does it take you to open up a new file? And again, because I had never had any other transaction coordinators near me to compare or take notes, I didn't know what the standard should be or what it could be. And David said that he uses 30 minutes. 30 minutes or less is scalable. That means that you can do 7 setups in a day for one person and still have half your day to take care of all the rest of your business. Okay, so that is an example of how I was not scalable and how he was able to pick a number, 30 minutes or less, that would be scalable. And then you kind of work backwards from there with the rest of the 5x5 to see how can we make changes to actually make this a scalable item. Okay, and then another way to look at this is when I'm implementing new services or new steps in my processes, or if I'm going to grow my business and I need to make a new hire, is my profit margin going to actually decrease as I grow? Because if it is, then you're not going to be able to grow too much, right? If you're continuing to cut your profit each time you add a new hire. So if that means with your tools, for example, if you have a subscription for a team price versus a new cost per team member, you can scale your expenses that way, if that makes sense. So there's multiple things that we can look at in our businesses. Processes is definitely one of them, but you can apply these to finances and other areas of your business as well. Going down to duplicatable, I reference this quickly as the ability to succeed when training new hires, to one day replace myself in the company, and the ability for my company to continue should anything happen to me. And you might not be a 8-person team or a 2-person team. You might be a solo person in your organization right now. But I'm going to really urge you to think about, is there ever a time in the future that you might want to get out of the business? What is your retirement plan? Because this business can be your retirement plan. You can make this a passive income business. Okay, so how can you do that? How can you make it duplicatable so that you can one day remove you? Or if you want to be solo and you have other plans for the future, if something was to happen to you today and your family relied on your income, is there any way that that business could proceed to still continue your family's income as it was? Or, just something set up so that there is directions on what to do so that the company can continue after that. And while we're talking about the hiring part of it, David talks about hiring real talented individuals. We all want talented people like Chrissy on our team, but our systems should not require somebody with real talent to come in and learn them. They need to be simple. So David gives us a great criteria of a second grader level of understanding when it comes to doing our procedures, our systems, using our tools. How can we make it simple? And that opens up the real talent that you do hire to really do A+ in their day-to-day tasks easily and use that real talent to continue to propel your business forward in other areas. And then also on duplicatable, I've written down that this doesn't just apply to new hires, but it applies to your business services as well. So all customers should be able to expect the same level of service, care, speed, and accuracy, regardless of what else might be on your plate that day. Regardless of how you're showing up, your systems should be duplicatable so that you can always put out the same level of service. And especially if you are making a hire at some point, whoever is filling in that position in the future needs to be able to have the same amount of knowledge to do that job that you do. Okay. So let's move down to freakishly predictable. And this is a hard one for me personally. So I'm going to kind of go over it a little more quicker and we'll come back to it later. But for me, I have this written down that this value is focused on preventing potential issues, questions, and any time-sucking activity. And we're going to prevent those things by analyzing the data that we have available to us or the knowledge that we have in our industry. And David would say that he would want us to be the most predictable thing ever in our clients' lives. And he has some great resources out there as well as how to accomplish this specifically through task batching and systematic time blocking. I'm probably not going to hit those two today, but we will come back to the predictable, assuming we have time towards the end. Okay, so going down to efficient. To me, efficient means achieving maximum productivity with minimal wasted effort. So not only are we going at a great speed, but we're not taking extra steps, doing extra clicks, doing unnecessary tasks that really don't get us the result that we need. We are achieving maximum productivity. And one way to grade your business systems on efficiency is to ask yourself, does it meet the 30-second rule? Can I find anything in 30 seconds or less? An example of that is if a client calls with a questions, can you locate that file? Can you pull up the relevant information that they're asking about? And can you actually give them an informed response within 30 seconds or less in whatever tool you're using with whatever systems that you have? Another example is if you have a team member, an assistant, whoever, and they have a question about what to do next on a certain procedure. Can they and do they have access to resources that can be found in 30 seconds or less and locate where their question would fit in that resource manual and potentially find an answer to their question without having to stop and interrupt another team member's workflow today? Okay. And then down to effective. Are we successfully achieving the desired results that we're shooting for? We need to be self-aware of how well or how not well we're doing. And that's really going to be our superpower in looking back at the 5x5. Okay. On the people side of things, we're going to ask yourself, is what you're doing creating peace, contentment, and joy for both ourselves and everyone around us? And as an organization, are we ensuring that everything we do is fully informed by gratitude and compassion? And compassion is specifically one of my struggle areas. So I'm going to stop and talk on this one a little bit more. And it took me quite a bit of time to understand that compassion ties into everything we do. And really, we're either being compassionate and considering the other people involved, or we're just missing the fact that everything that we do is ultimately affecting those people around us. So we're either being compassionate or we're really choosing to have a blind eye to that side of our business. So how do we implement and act on the core value of compassion? And I actually see this in two different categories. I see this as having compassion to yourself and having compassion to others. And my opinion is that you always need to put you first. When we talk about compassion, it's easy to think that applies to other people, especially when we are in the service industry. We're here to serve other people. Looking at that word compassion might make you think, I need to be compassionate towards other people first. But it is important to choose you. Give yourself permission to choose you first. And the reason for that is that your mood will ultimately impact how you show up to everybody around you. So if you're not on your own level experiencing peace, contentment, joy, how are you going to show up to those clients? Are you even going to be here in a year if you are burnt out, not happy with your job? Are you going to be there for those clients? So really, you cannot be compassionate to those around you without first looking at yourself and making sure that you are the best you to be there for those around you. So 1, give yourself permission to put you first, make that commitment to yourself. And 2, don't be too hard on yourself. Build some grace into everything you do because you're going to fall a little bit. You're going to still have struggles. So build in that grace and tell yourself now that is okay. Okay, so now getting on the other side of compassion, when we're talking about how do we affect others. Did you know in a real estate transaction, we can potentially touch about 16 people, maybe more, on every single file? Now that's not just the seller, not just the buyer, not just the listing agent, not just the selling agent. We've got inspectors, we've got appraisers, we've got escrow teams, we've got lending teams, but we're also having an impact on all their families. And whether or not we're intentionally impacting them or not, the actions that we take have a reactive effect on those people around us. So I'm going to give you an example. One of the agents that I work with primarily services a remote neighborhood way out in the mountains. We love it. It's a recreational area. He's a really high producer, so it's not uncommon for us to have multiple properties go under contract in a single week. And when I mentioned that this place is remote, it can take an hour plus drive to get out there, depending on where the inspector is and where the agent is at that time. So using this scenario, it's pretty common for admin to follow a checklist. And so they get a new contract and then a task triggers that would allow them to, or remind them to set up an inspection. And if we use that checklist, what we're going to do is reach out to inspector 3 different times throughout the week on properties that are actually neighboring each other, miles and miles away, takes them hours to drive. Okay, that's convenient to me because I've got a message on my task list that says, hey, reminder to do this. And that's an acceptable practice in our industry, is to order an inspection after we go pending. Okay, but what this means for the people around me is that that inspector is going to drive out to that neighborhood 3 times. My agent is going to need to drive out to that property 3 times to give him access. And during that time, they're not going to be able to do any income producing activities for their business. They're not going to be able to spend time with their family, take a vacation, do whatever they wanted to do. What I'm doing by setting those 3 appointments at different times is essentially stealing some of that time away from them and some of the joy that they could have when interacting with me if I had taken the time to ask my agent on the first one that we received, is there any other contracts in negotiation? That's all that it would take for me. Is there any other contracts in negotiation right now so that we can put a placeholder for the inspector to be out there for an extended period of time and work all 3 properties at once versus him going out there 3 times? And that was going to save the inspector at least 4 hours in just driving time, and my agent an additional 4 hours in just driving time. So when we're looking at compassion, what we're really doing is saying, hey, this is a person that's on my team or that I'm interacting with. What does the 5x5 look when I put them up against it? Am I allowing them to be scalable, duplicatable, freakishly predictable, efficient, effective? And are they doing their tasks that I'm asking them to while having peace, contentment, joy, gratitude, compassion? Okay. Does everybody understand that? How something so simple that, as an admin, that's how I was trained. I would never even think to say, how is what I'm doing affecting somebody that's not even part of my organization in their life? So let's look at a couple more examples of how we can have compassion. Another thing that I worked on with David pretty quickly when we first got together, the very first call, was the fact that part of my 1.5-hour long intake process for new contracts was reaching out to the agent or emailing them back and forth with the information that I might be missing or that I just didn't know. How could I send out an email to their client to say, hey, your earnest money is due on this date with this much funds, if I didn't know who the escrow company was that they should be delivering that to? How can I set up and send out an intro to escrow saying set up escrow if I didn't know who the escrow agent was? Okay, so being compassionate, I worked on creating an intake form that is mandatory for my agents. And I want to bring this up because there are so many people out in our industry that say, my agent wouldn't do that. How can I expect them to do something that only helps me? How is that being compassionate? I'm being compassionate by not making them fill out a form, by me taking the extra time to do all that extra work for them. So the compassion with the form actually comes in because during that 1.5 hours, while I was scrambling, trying to find what I need, How many times did I have to communicate with the agent? How many text, phone calls, messages, emails were going back and forth? And every time I didn't get a complete answer or not enough, or when I got a new document, a new question would arise. Okay, I had never given them the standards or given them a way to successfully meet the standards in a second grader level. On an intake form, I can say this is a mandatory required field. They do not have the option to accidentally miss that field, which means that I do not need to continue to call them, to text them, to pester them while they are out working with other clients, doing their activities. They are not needing to help me do my job that I promised them I'm going to do, because they have now given me everything that I need at the get-go to do the job quickly, efficiently on their behalf. Okay, so mandatory information, not having the communication back and forth, that is showing compassion. How else is an intake form compassionate? I know that real estate agents work mobily. Rarely is there an agent that sits in their broker's office and that they're there from 9 to 5. Even the folks that are working at home, they're rarely at their desk from 9 to 5 if they are a real estate agent. If they are giving you contracts, they're likely out showing properties, having listing appointments, doing CMAs. They are out lead generating. If they get a contract and they need to send it to me and they're on the road, how are they going to get that? And how are they going to give me all the information that I need? So me being compassionate is creating that form that they can save on their phone and they can submit it to me. It only takes maybe 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes at the most to fill out. And then they're done and they don't have to worry about it again. They don't have to wait until they're home at 11 o'clock at night to send that to me. They don't have to make an extra trip to their office between appointments. They can do it on the go, quickly and efficiently for them. Okay, so that's kind of a couple of examples of how I'm going to be compassionate to the agent, to the inspectors, to whoever I can throughout the transaction. Okay. And then now we get into the freakishly predictable. Let's come back to this. Okay, I said this was a tough one. David talks a lot about time blocking and predicting what communication needs to be had when. I'm not going to talk about that today because that is definitely hard. You can do it. I did it. Yay. It's possible and it's amazing. But we're talking about the practical application, and I don't think that I'm yet qualified to teach anybody anything on that. Okay. So for me, being predictable doesn't have to be that hardcore. Okay. There's other ways that we can apply predictability to our business. And really what we're doing, what we're trying to do is just predict where we could have a pitfall in the transaction. And we're going to systematically make sure that we never get to that point. Does that make sense? Okay, so how can we do that? How can we predict a possible pitfall? So I'm going to give an example of when we get a cancellation, an actual contract termination. And you should be able to see in your business, you should be able to see what percentage of contracts cancel. We have so much data available because we receive it all throughout the transaction. We have all the contacts. We know the reasons for everything. We have the documents. We know what kind of financing they're getting. We know what their contingencies are. We are the holders of the data. So we can use that data. So If we know that 20% of our transactions are going to cancel, okay, if we know that and we start looking deeper at when are they canceling? Are they canceling because of the seller disclosure? Are they canceling because of the inspection? Are they canceling because of the appraisal? Okay. We've got a hot market, so appraisal canceling isn't as relevant right now, but typically, we've all been in the industry for long enough. We know that contracts, when they cancel, are usually because of the inspection period. Something was wrong with the house. So looking at our business, we're going to use that. We can predict that. We can predict that when something's going to flip, it's most likely going to be with the home inspection. And now we're looking at our system and we're figuring out how can we be more scalable? Where can we cut out some fat? Where can we move some stuff around? Is there any items that we're doing prior to inspection that are really sucking our time that might be able to be pushed off until after the inspection so that we save that time on anything that's canceled, that 20% that is canceling? That's a way that we can use data that we have to help push our business forward. Another way that we can be predictable is if we get a question from a buyer or a seller or from one of our team members, and we're like, man, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Let me find it out. I can predict that that is not going to be the last time that that question gets answered or gets asked. Okay, I know that that's not going to be the last time. It might be the first time that it's asked, but there's a reason why it was asked. And I should have a template for how to respond to that, or something in our ops manual, or a team training on how to deal with that problem. Because it does not help anybody if I'm the only one that holds the information. That's not pushing them forward in their roles, and it's just putting more on me as the business owner. So I can predict that if a question is happening, it's going to happen again, especially if it happens twice and I didn't get the time to make that ops manual yet. I need to get on it, right? We want to make sure that that's not continuing to come up as an issue and nobody knows how to deal with it. David goes into, with the predictability, being reactive and being proactive and being predictable. So being reactive with my inspection example means that every time that we get a new contract, I'm going to schedule an inspection, maybe one day or the same day, triggered by that event of a new transaction. Being proactive would mean that I'm going to do it a little bit sooner. So the deadline for that inspection is 10 days after mutual acceptance. Being reactive means that I'm going to make sure that it is done before that 10 days. But being proactive means that I'm going to get it done right away so that I don't have to deal with it later, right? We're going to work ahead of being reactive. Being predictable goes back to that compassion. I can predict, based on the knowledge that I have of my agent in that area, that I will receive more contracts in that same neighborhood this same week. Okay, so when we're talking about how these things, really connect, that compassion towards that inspector is just as much that I am predicting at this point that there is going to be more transactions coming down the pipeline and that I could save myself time. I'm going to be scalable by sending out one inspection request instead of scheduling 3 different inspections. Okay, I hope that kind of makes sense. Does anybody have any questions about any of the concepts in the 5x5? Christy, can you help me out? Is there any comments or anything?
No comment so far. I
Okay.
am quite curious. Like, this is giving me a new perspective on how the 5x5 is actually applied in
Mm-hmm.
real life and in real time. So, it made me realize that every person has their own journey and adventure in terms of applying the 5x5. So I am curious, is there anybody in the group that has tried to apply the 5x5 and has worked for them so far? Because I think it's gonna like give us a fresh perspective. Like every story counts. So feel free to
Mm-hmm.
share with us if you have any like stories you want to tell. So the chat box is open. And, Megan did chat that she has no questions so far. Just wanted to say that these are really great examples. And I agree with her.
Awesome. Okay, so let's start. At the beginning of this, I said that the actual magic of the 5x5 actually happens when you're applying it as a roadmap, right? So we've kind of talked about what each of these things are, but actually, how do we apply it as a roadmap? So let's all do a little exercise together. And I'm going to encourage you to think about what your vision is for yourself, for your business. Where do you want to be next year, in 3 years, in 5 years? And I'd love to hear what your goals and your visions are in the comments. And then while you guys are doing that, I'm going to just talk a little bit about what my goals are currently. And we're going to pressure test the 5x5 against my goals. Because in no way am I or am David or anybody else saying that the 5x5 is the best core principles or the only core principles. But at the same time, sorry, I shouldn't say but, and at the same time, they seem to work universally for different business owners with different goals across different companies and even different industries, and in our personal lives, not even on a business scale at all. So let's pressure test this and see, does this actually work to your unique needs and business goals? So for me, my immediate goals is that I want the freedom to work less than 40 hours a week. Okay, I do not want to be in the office chained to a desk in a 9 to 5 when I'm working for myself, and I did this for freedom. So in order to achieve that, I need to scale the business. I need to be efficient, cut out all the fat, cut out all the waste. And at the same time, if I'm going to continue with the business, I need to ensure that everything I'm doing is being just as effective as it was when I was working more hours. Okay, I want to provide an enjoyable working environment for my parents until they eventually retire. And I'll tell you, working 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. is not enjoyable. Is not. Okay, I don't care if all you guys, Nicole, I'm looking at you as far as we like to work in this industry. We're workhorses, but that's not a sustainable, enjoyable working environment. So in respect to my parents, I need to make sure that everything we do gives peace, contentment, and joy. Okay. And eventually, at some point, I would like to have the business be my retirement plan. I would like to have this be a passive income business versus me working in files or having to be here in the day-to-day duties. So that means that my systems, my tools, everything needs to be duplicatable for whoever's going to take over my position. And I'm going to need to have a whole lot of gratitude, which I already do, but compassion towards my team. If I'm not giving them the same compassion that I'm giving to myself, I will not be able to retain anybody, and our business will not sustain without me. Okay, so looking at my goals, I did not make these goals to support the 5x5. These goals absolutely support, I'm sorry, these values absolutely support what my goals are. So I'd love to hear from you guys. What are your guys' goals? Does this seem to support? Do we need to make any modifications to this? Is there anything that you're saying, you know, I don't understand how one of these values could help me reach my goal? Anybody? Okay. I'll move on. You guys can do that on your own time later. Okay, so when we're using this as a roadmap, that's the first thing you're going to do. You're going to pressure test the 5x5. You're not going to pressure test your goals. You're going to determine what your goals are, and they don't have to be like, this is what I'm actually going to start working on today. Just what do you envision for yourself? Where do you want to be eventually? Okay, and see, does this actually resonate with what your goals are? If you worked on any one of these areas, would that help bring you any closer to that goal? And the reason why I want you to do this exercise is because if we do not have some type of emotional connection to the tasks that we're doing, it's really hard to be accountable to it. Okay, so for me, people are raising? Okay, let's hear it.
Well, we are having some realizations. Ashley just mentioned that I have a lot of duplication that I need to get done. And then Courtney says that she's filtering new agents through the 5x5, which is amazing. Congratulations. And we do have one question that I think you still have time to answer. Tashina is asking, how did you get the agents to use your intake form?
Great question. Okay. I predicted that they would not know how. I predicted that they would say no. I predicted that they would say they didn't have any time. That's what I did. So, working backwards from that, I put in a good, compassionate pitch of how this is actually in their best interests. This isn't about me. This is about them. I cannot set up their file as quickly as they want to. And I want to make sure that I can give them the best turn time ever. I cannot submit something to compliance if I don't have the documents. They're not going to get paid. This is the best way for them to get paid. They don't know how to do it. I'm going to make a video. They're not tech savvy enough to put it on their phone when I say, hey, you know, this is great for your phone. And they're like, okay, that's awesome. But then they forgot about the link and they don't know where it is and they're not going to put it on their phone. Okay. Michelle Martinez showed me that there is a great GIF that actually gives somebody instructions on how to save an icon or a link as an icon on your phone. You send them a text with those instructions. Here's your link. Follow these instructions. Okay. And these don't have to be looking at scalable, duplicatable, all these things. I should have a conversation with my agents one-to-one. I am not a people person, which is why the compassion side is a little bit harder for me. It doesn't resonate as well with me because that's just not my initial instinct, is not people. Just in general, people aren't my first thing. So I personally hate getting on the phone with people. But knowing all that stuff, I can put together a little drip campaign. Okay, I can do the work once and I can say, here's the new system. Okay, follow up. Here's the text with the link again and how to save it to your phone. Follow up. Have you been able to put this on a phone yet? Here's the video. Follow up. Do you need me to help put that on your phone for you? Okay. So all those, does that help answer?
Lindsey, can I add to that you from something you've taught me on that? Because I still have not implemented an intake form yet. and I asked the same question, how did you get them to use it, right? And you gave me what you sent them and how it helped them, but then you ended it with, if you don't do it, I won't open your escrow.
Yeah. And that's being compassionate to myself.
Right. That was the answer of, if you don't do my form, I will not process your escrow.
Yeah.
Clean and simple.
Yep.
So
because I cannot give them the services. And that's the answer. Hey, yep, what you said. And then in that conversation, if they're getting back to me, I'm going to say, hey, here's the link. Let me know if you need help putting it on your phone. Again, that's a canned templated thing. And like she said, if they say, no, I don't want to do it that way, well, my response is going to be, well, I can't do it any other way, because I will not be giving you the service that I want to professionally put out there for you. Okay. I think that's kind of it. Do you guys have any more questions about that intake form? Or how it, predictability and compassion play really greatly into that one thing. I mean, we can talk about how that's scalable and duplicatable and efficient and all those things all day long. But on the two things that I have the problem with the most, being predictable, having compassion, an intake form really hits on all 10 of these core values. Okay, so moving on, we don't have time. We don't have time. We're out, man. Okay, so real quick, baby steps on how to actually use this as a roadmap. You're going to pressure test the 5x5 against your goals. You're going to try to make an emotional connection so that this actually lives at your core. You understand in everything that you do, I am not going to ever reach that goal unless I can work on these values. Having these values, knowing what those questions are to ask myself, these are your North Star. They're your compass. How am I getting to my end goal? So the second baby step is just to look at your business. Okay. What is stealing your joy? A lot of people will say, how can we make you happier? But we are already overwhelmed. We have too much on our plate. We can't add something, even if it's meant to make us happier. It's not possible. We can't fit it in. I can predict that I will not honor that. Okay. So we are going to make a list of what steals our joy. We're going to pinpoint the thing that can make the biggest impact on us. And then we're going to audit it against the 5x5. Just choose one of the values and see, is there anything that I can do with this current system that I have to make it more scalable, to make it more predictable? Just choose one of them. Okay. And do that quarterly. Don't go redo your whole system. Just pick one thing. And if you can come back again next quarter and pick another thing or another value, then you're moving in the right direction. Okay. Anybody have any last minute questions or anything before we go?
I would love to share that the graphic that you're showing right now is available as a template. So we're giving it away for free. You can use it as your own, like design it, change the logo, change the colors, and then just say to everyone that it's yours. That's the way David promotes it, because we really want other people to enjoy the benefits of having the 5x5 in their lives and in their business. So I'm posting the link of the template, and you can definitely join the Facebook group, because we love hearing stories like this. So Lindsey just affirmed that she's the master applicator, and I'm so happy that this webinar happened. And I'm gonna tease David because he's gonna be so jealous. So thank you everyone for joining the conversation. Go ahead, Lindsey. Any last things that you want to share with the group?
I think that's as much as we can fit in today, at least. Yes. Just knowing that if you're working in one area, if that scalability, that makes sense to you, working on that one thing, if you work on that one thing long enough, you will start to understand how, even if you're only working on scalability, you're going to start being compassionate, bringing in more joy to your life, doing all those things. Working on one is going to naturally trigger everything else in that 5x5. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you all coming out. I hope this was of value.